Hello everybody, welcome to you. Alan Robson with you, out and about again. I hope you're going to come with us and have a thoroughly nice time. I'm not alone, apart from Mr. and Mrs. Mallard here. And Kenny D is behind me, and behind the camera, Hollywood McShane. So thanks very much for coming out with us. We're in an amazing place. We're in a place that's called the town near the field, Felton. A lot of you will not even have any clue that this is here, but if you look down by the riverside just here is the original ford. And the reason this became the A1 in old England, the route all the way up from London to Scotland. Carriages crossed here, headed, and again, the landscape was a little bit different. Across the other side of the river, you've got houses there now. But it was this ford was the original thing, and you'd go straight across. And the amazing thing is, there's two bridges here. The one that you can see yonder is the new bridge for the motorway. But we're talking carriages here, way back in the 1700s. Travelling all the way from London, stopping off. How long do you think it would take to get from London in a carriage to Edinburgh? Edinburgh.
From London to Edinburgh, carriage.
Through Felton, yep.
Month?
13 days. And then the weird thing was that when they sped things up and they put better roads in, they could do it in 60 hours. And it was full pelt, and it would be the, you complain if you're on a coach for any length of time, or if you're in that flight was ridiculous and you had all the luxuries of home. Imagine doing this. But these bridges here and this ground, particularly where I am, is starting us off. It's quite light. The colour in the sky will drop like a tarpaulin over us over the next 10 to 15 minutes. We know that that's going to happen. But imagine this. The ducks just want to be featured. And weirdly enough, Kenny ate a duck just before we came out.
I really did.
He had a duck wrap. However, one of the first people following William the Conqueror conquering, and we became just a piece of France, and that's the truth of it. I know British history never says we were a part of France, because we shall never be slaves, but we were. And the man in the 1200s that Felton was given to was a man called Bertram, and he became the Baron Bertram of Felton. And he made a mistake. Because of where we are in Northumberland and its proximity to Scotland, he didn't like the English king, King John at the time. Excuse me. So what he did was, he invited King Alexander of Scotland down here to Felton and said, look, let's have an allegiance. We'll fight against the English king with you. And as soon as King John heard this, he said, well, the hell with that. And he sent an entire army to Felton. The English king sent a whole army here to put down Baron Bertram. And they came into Felton, set fire to all the buildings and burnt Felton to the ground. And weirdly, in one of the documents, because around this time you've got stuff like the Magna Carta happening, in one of the court documents it was said, Bertram's hometown is no more. Their ghosts scream out in terror for the revenge given by our glorious king. How about that? Little Felton. That's Felton, for heaven's sake. Now, moving a little bit further, after the troops had gone through, there was about 40 or 50 prisoners, mostly men, but some women. And some of the women here, I've got a story about some of the women here fighting bare-breasted with swords and stuff. I mean, there's unbelievable stories to come. But they brought the rest of the prisoners, because they didn't want to take them back to London. They didn't particularly want to hang them. So they brought them down to the ford. Da-da. And on this side of the river, exactly where we are now, They took them to the river and they just put them to the sword, one after the other, and sent them off down the river. Now, the idea was so that the blood in the river would stretch all the way through. Now, this is the River Coquet, and it goes the longest, the absolute longest way. So he massacred the captured prisoners, executed them by the ford, so that all of the other villages along the Coquet would see the blood and fear the king. And what he was doing was replicating something that the Romans did on the Coquet, a little bit higher up the Coquet, and it was called Coquida Flaminis. And Coquida Flaminis means red river. And weirdly, the Coquet in places is red because of the soil in the banks, nothing to do with blood. But on 2 occasions, this river ran red with blood because of wiping out of civilians. So anyway, let's have a slow walk up. The places that we're going center around the bridge, really, because immediately after that, the next Lord Bertram decided to rebel with the Scots too. That led him to being killed, and his barony was scrapped and taken away from him. Then, during the War of the Roses, not this bridge, but the other bridge that you'll be able to see in a moment, the War of the Roses, for heaven's sake. What was your favourite? Mine was the little light chocolate one with the dots, the strawberry one.
Oh.
I like the strawberry one best. But the War of the Roses, the actual War of the Roses, they fought back and forth over Felton Bridge. There's an amazing story about the Civil War here, and I mentioned bare-breasted women.
Yeah.
And I was going to knock on a few of the doors of the good people of Felton, but I've heard that some of them can be quite posh.
Yes, very posh.
So
you know what happens
when we hit posh, I know we. Yeah. So I was going to ask some of the ladies to reenact it for me, but
I don't think that'd be a good idea.
No, we're crossing over here too. Big sign for the Coquet. Northumberland Arms is there, which is a good bar if you're nice people, I gather.
Rob the manager, yeah, nice guy. You should listen to you all the time.
Well, he's a wise man. So
he's called at night time when he finished work, and then he listened to ghost stories, driving back, jumping on his car, scared. He used to love it.
So this is the old bridge, but there was an even older one that was made of wood back in the day. But imagine fighting back and forth. The Lancastrians against the Yorkists, back and forth on here.
Crazy, isn't it?
It's brilliant, is what it is.
But it's crazy as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And there's a story about that, but we'll come to that soon. So, as you see, you're quite a way up here. But the story of this bridge here, let me just tell it let's be on it while we tell it, really, I suppose. Imagine this. It's the English Civil War.
Yeah.
The Scots are on the side of the Royalists.
Right.
And then they switch sides like the Italians did in World War II. And suddenly the Scots are chasing the Royalists. Well, the Royalists came down what is now Main Street, which is just over there, and they piled across this bridge. Remember, that bridge wasn't there. Yeah. So they piled across this bridge. Now, what the Royalists used to do, they had a tactic, and it's a sensible one. They'd get to the bridge. This bridge was it was here, but it wasn't the concrete bridge. It was the wooden bridge. Right. So the idea was, let's destroy every bridge we get across, and then the Scots can't catch us. Yeah. Well, makes sense. So anyway, they came down and across here, and they were going to destroy the wooden bridge. They started lighting fires at the side of it, and there was about 70 Royalists, Cavaliers, if you prefer. And the northeast was on the side of the Cavaliers mainly. Right. And the Scots were chasing them, so they started setting fire to the bridge. And in a document, a historical document about Felton, it said, "The rough women of the town gathered swords and cudgels and scythes, bared their breasts and attacked the Royalists, forcing them to keep the bridge in place. and the bridge has remained in place ever since, which I think, you know, we're talking seriously wild women here.
Yeah, totally.
The wild women of Felton. And it's beautiful. It's just beautiful. But we've got to go. We've got 2 or 3 seriously haunted bits that we'll be visiting by the time the light dissipates a little bit more. So until it does, I thought we'd go up, because there's a couple of stories up this hill. And this is the main street. So anybody who's ever lived in Felton's probably been up the main street. Absolutely. And there's a story about that, but we'll come to that a bit later, and that is a ghost story. It's weird because in the last 50 to 100 years, there's no ghost story attached to it. Right. But if you go back just over 100 years, there is a ghost story about it. I think the interesting thing is that some stories just seem to disappear with time. Yeah. Do you know what I mean? Yeah. But anyway, well, probably. No, absolutely. Well, I mean, that's part and parcel of what we're doing. So we got to get across this side because we're coming back down that one.
Anything in history, we wouldn't have a clue.
No, absolutely. But the weird thing is, this was the A1. This was the main road up to Scotland.
How crazy is that?
I just think it's amazing, really. Tiny little village that it's off our real A1.
Yeah.
And you'd never miss it. No disrespect to the town, but you'd never miss it. And a lot of these houses are relatively modern. So they don't have any stories particularly attached to them until you start getting up a little bit. He's so you know we were talking about the Civil War. Hang on. Always look at little. Here we go. Oliver Cromwell stayed here. When the Parliamentary Army passed through Felton en route to the Battle of Dunbar, 2 nights here. This was the pub. Can you see it there, Tony? If you look up there, that says Angle. The old Angle, but it was the Angel Inn back in the day. The Angel Inn obviously doesn't exist. It's somebody's home now. But just about to say, he came through for the Battle of Dunbar, where he ended up killing 3,000 Scotsmen. Oliver Cromwell stayed there. Wow. Now, after he stayed here, obviously we've told the story of Cromwell, how he died and he was buried in the Abbey, and then when the royals got back on the throne again, the body of Cromwell was dug up, and then they hanged him, executed him, decapitated him, put his head on a pole. So this is all the things that happened after he died. Now, around that time, Cromwell's ghost was sent to walk the Angel Inn. Now, that story only kind of happened for about 30, 50 years. And what you've got to look at here is a lot of the names here. This is the next place we go to. The post house. Now, I know it's a shop and a store and all those kind of things. Do you know what a post house was? Because you think you know.
But you would have thought it's something to do with post or whatever.
And it kind of is.
Right.
Post stands for postilion.
Right.
The postilion house. And this used to be an inn, used to be a tavern, this whole block, which is now hair salons and various other things. But this used to be another tavern, and people would come up. Remember, they're on the A1. This is the main road. Yeah. So the coaches would stop and people would get out and they'd sleep in the post house. And a postilion is a young boy that you could rent. A rent boy. Do you remember when you were young, what your dad told you to do?
No.
With those men down by the big market?
No.
Well, anyway, but you could rent post boys, and they would get on the coach with the coachman and help the coachman ride the coaches, pack the baggage,
right,
look after him in any way that he might have wanted to.
I think that is so cool. Look, eggs, fish. Just delivered.
Just delivered, and
There they are.
yeah, it's lovely.
Fresh eggs.
But this is village life. It's something that I've never known, and I think many of us won't. But the post house also had horses for hire. If a coach had a horse that had damaged itself or needed shoeing, you could leave that horse here, rent another horse, and off you go. So that's the post house. And of course, they also collected the mail to be put on the coach to take to Edinburgh and then take it back to London.
I think we need to go and do a talk there, look.
With Astrid and
Giles,
talking about Ganseys.
Yeah.
Do you know what a Gansey is?
It's a jumper, isn't it?
It's your outfit, isn't it?
Yeah.
I'm going to wear my finest Gansey.
Oh, you're kidding.
It's all right down here.
To there.
Can we go up then?
Coach. Not work down there.
That's a shame. We've just got to get to that corner.
Right. Is it worth... Oh, if he's lost the signal, he'll not be able to pick you up, will he?
That's a bit annoying.
Right.
We'll have to go with him, I suppose.
Go down and then just talk about it.
That's a shame. Fancy walking into Oliver Cromwell's house.
That's crazy, isn't it?
It's amazing.
I mean, literally just there. Imagine living there though, and knowing that.
Yeah.
And that's where they would have. Well, they wouldn't be like that then, would they?
Are we back? Not yet.
Just getting back in now. You're back.
So, Tony, if you step out, because the signal seems to disappear halfway up this hill, if you walk out to the road, you might be able to see a white house on the right-hand side.
Yeah.
Now, we talked about the post house before. Hang on, don't get killed, Kim. We talked about the post house before. Every house in this area seems to have its own story. Now, the white building over yonder also has a name. Yeah, every house seems to have a name and a story. Well, that white building that you can see in the distance, just up ahead where the signal disappears, is the old livery.
Right.
Now, I thought the old livery must mean stables again.
Yeah, you would have thought so.
But the old livery apparently is an original meeting hall set up from medieval times for wealthy people. And the more new businesses that came to Felton, and they started setting, I mean, for a tiny little place, they had tailors, butchers, they had potters, millers. There was a massive mill here. So they had an awful lot of different businesses all kind of kicking off. And because of that, everybody who owned a business thought he was an important member of the community. So it's not the Freemasons, but it was a similar kind of society. And there were over 400 of them around Britain. Now, moving beyond that, and again, looking back, Tony, if you can see the tallest house on the right-hand side, the house that's right at the end. Now, that house is on a lane called Recreation Lane. Now, Recreation Lane is called Recreation Lane because all of these businesses needed a little bit of sexual fun with working girls. And the story that I've been told was that Recreation Lane used to have a really disgusting name. Right. And I've looked everywhere to try and find out what the disgusting name was. Because obviously we'd love to know, just so we can tell you. And all over Britain, there are lanes that were used for a lot of women of ill repute who didn't have a home because they had a home with their children and their families, but they didn't have a place they could bring a punter to have sex with. Right. So they would take them into a lane or an alley or a close and give them names. Now, I've written down a few of the names, and all I did was type in names of streets used by prostitutes UK. That's all I typed into Google, and what came out was the first one uses the C word, the nasty C word, and this was actually a street name. It was called Grope C Lane. It was spelt K-U,
Yeah.
Grope C name, Balls Pond Road, White Knobs Way, Laycock Street, Helmet Row, Back Passage, Swallow Street, Cold Blow Lane, Effing Lane, Bell End, and Many Cox Terrace. And they're real names. So we don't know what the name of Recreation Street was, but we'd love to find out. And if anybody knows, tell us. And even if you don't know,
make one up. Cold Blow Lane, I'm sure.
It's beside Millwall.
I'm sure it was that.
It's beside Millwall. Absolutely. So people do know these street names. Every house has a name, and some of them are great. Look at that. Old Britain House. And when you look through it, it reeks of kind of Victorian values, doesn't it? Tremendous. Just amazing stories to the left and to the right. Hello, ladies. Hi. So, heading down here. Two other things that we've got to mention just before we get to the corner. And one is Wassailing. Now, we talked roughly about Wassailing when we did that fair.
Yeah.
Remember the goose fair that we did in Ovenjum? Well, there was a very famous fair here called Felton Fair.
Right.
The Felton races. And in its day, it was as popular as the Bladen races in Northumberland. Now, when we're looking around this place, we should talk about Wassailing, because out of all of the villages in Northumberland, this place here, and it's idyllic. We're going to go into the darkness soon, but it's idyllic. This whole place, Wassailing. Can you remember what we said about Wassailing? Where did it come from and all of that? Because it's absolutely not a Christian thing.
No.
It's a pagan thing. It comes from the name Wassailing. And Wassailing is a Viking pagan name for singing songs at the four solstices: spring, summer, autumn, winter. So it's a consummate pagan thing. The Vikings, when they took over our country, at least 2/3 of it, it became the thing that everybody did. And the Christians came in and they didn't like people wassailing. Now, the whole point of a wassail is to let the evil spirits hear that you are encouraging nature to be wonderful and to grow crops and to keep the fish in the rivers and deer in the fields and all of that. So you've got old-fashioned pagan values is essentially that. If you look after nature, nature will look after you. That's it. However, the Christians came and they set up Presbyterian churches here, Methodist churches, and a whole host of others. And the interesting thing was they knew that Felton in particular had this history of the wassail. And all over the place, there were groups of people who went wassailing. So they had to try and do something to say, well, that's sacrilegious, it's evil, it's wicked, it's pagan, it's against God. So they called it caroling.
Right.
And then they said, but you can only do it at Christmas. Well, you could wassail at any time. But they said, you can only do this at Christmas. Then they realized that they'd made a mistake, because where does the word carol come from? It comes from a French word called carole, where you go and you sing spring, summer, autumn, and winter. And if you look it up, it actually means, get it right, Alan, it actually means singing around the standing stones. So it's even reflecting even more pagan things.
Yeah, of course.
So wherever you go, it's there. And the verse sail, simply in Viking, if you're wondering what it means, verse sail, it means good health to you. And when you're singing with all your mates, good health to you, you could kind of picture it. So pagan roots, this village, and yet heavily church now. In all directions, heavily church.
Top tip though, that's a great idea, look.
What is it? Bricks on your wheelie bin?
Brick on your wheelie bin so it doesn't blow away.
and
When it's windy,
it stops people getting in it.
yeah. Put a brick on the top and lock it away.
Well, there you go. Amazing. Now, the only ancient ghost story I could find, and there's two attached to this building here. And the guy's just gone in as well, the Running Fox. This used to be called, it's an artisan bakery and cafe, and it's got a great reputation. Get like 3 courses of sandwiches and cakes and coffee for about 15 quid apparently. And I wish they were open because we'd probably have one. But there's
This is nice as well.
beautiful. 2 stories attached to it. When it was the Widrington Inn, there was a fella, an ex-landlord called Arthur Fox. And back in the late 1800s, the Widrington Inn had a ghost story because Arthur Fox died and his ghost used to walk around the pub and locals would see him sweeping beers off the table and that kind of stuff. So I know it's all been redone. Be interesting to know whether Arthur's anywhere about. But the other story, it was called the Widrington Inn. And there's a story here about a man called Edward Widrington.
Right.
And it's named, the Widdy Inn was named after him. Now, the story of Captain Edward Widrington, he supported King James II, and he ended up getting hacked to death at the Battle of the Boyne, fighting against William of Orange. So how much history have we had? And we've just covered such a small, tiny area. Now, the main ghost story isn't about Edward Widrington.
Right.
It isn't. He got hacked to death at the Battle of the Boyne. His wife, Dorothy Horsley, used to come here every day that he was away fighting, because that's in Ireland, obviously, the Battle of the Boyne. Yeah. She used to come here to the bridge, to the north side of the bridge, which this is. Yeah. She used to come to the north side of the bridge. She would bring her weave. She would bring her... She didn't do knitting, she did embroideries. Right. And she would sit here at the edge of the bridge waiting for a man to come back from Ireland because his ship would sail into Newcastle and he would ride back across the bridge. Right. So she wanted to be here when a man came home. When she was told he was dead and he was apparently pulled off his horse and completely hacked to pieces by the Irish, when she was told that, she said, "That is not true. My husband would never allow that to happen," like he had much of a choice. And she used to walk, so her ghost was said to walk this side of the bridge for hundreds of years. For like 180, 190 years she was here. Crazy, and I think it's fascinating. But I mentioned that this area has a ghost, and the ghost's in the phone box.
What?
It's absolutely
in there.
The ghost's in the phone box. I found a story. This was a story from 1973. Now, Kenny's in the box with the spirit. Now it's an information box now. They've changed it, and everything you need to know about logbooks. There's little leaflets on things you can see if you come to Felton. Yeah, it's lovely. But the story, this is not my story. It's a story from Newcastle's Evening Chronicle and Journal. The story was published in 1973, and apparently a couple of women saw that there was somebody in the phone box. Now, it was a working phone box in the 70s, right? And that's actually quite creepy on its own, isn't it?
Well, when I was in there, that door should be easy to open, but it really wasn't.
Yeah?
Go in and have it. Just see if it's me. It's probably me just being weak. It just seemed to be like...
Scooby-Doo door.
Oh, it is.
And the weird thing was... Oh, yeah, yeah. Yeah, you could be trapped in there for days. The weird thing was, just looking through ghosty stories, Evening Chronicle, story, Felton ghost in a phone box. 2 women came down from the main street wanting to make a phone call, because you got to remember it's the 70s. Yes, people didn't have phones in their houses, a lot of them, and they relied on this. They needed to make an urgent phone call. One of their family was really ill. They needed to know that they were all right. So the two women were standing outside. There's a man in a military uniform in the phone box. He's on the phone. They waited. They kind of waited, hung about and waited. What do?
Not what yeah.
Started knocking on the glass, and it wasn't that cheap stuff. It was the big, oh, it's that stuff.
Yeah.
Because they've got a fake one in there. So the man stayed on the telephone, and the woman said he actually looked around as if to say, get away, or worse, probably. And so she waited another few minutes. She was desperate to find out about her family, so she reached for the handle, pulled the door open, and just as she did, the man disappeared.
In front of her.
Right in front of her and her friend. They both saw it. They both freaked. The Chronicle sent a reporter up. There was a little interview. I don't know what it was. What did he look like? And they described a military uniform, but not a modern one.
Right.
Not a modern one. No, not 70s. Could it have been World War II? Possibly. Could it have been World War I? Possibly. But the thing that makes the ghost stories a bit more interesting is the other story that I found, which is kind of ghost related too. And it's odd. It's the kind of story that we've never come across before. So how we're doing. But I just think it's always lovely to see one of these. Yeah. I know there was some company selling them to turn them into showers and stuff in people's houses. But it's weird that there should be that story there. Yeah. And literally like 50, 60 yards down the road, there's a war memorial that's got a tale. And there's a story by the Riverbank, again, from back in the English Civil War. So, as you can see, it's starting to darken in. It's heading in that direction. And the reason we're here, and I'll tell you a bit later the full stories, but we've had two of you recommending Felton. So this is for Sheena and Ian. Thank you very much for your recommendation. It is starting to get... That's a duck getting out your way, Kerry. That's what's happening.
I just ate your brother.
So here's the war memorial. And, you know, we often look at war memorials and we think, was there anybody here from Felton that gave their lives? And there was plenty, absolutely plenty. But how do you think a war memorial can make someone's spirit rise from the grave? Why would that ever happen?
Why would it?
And you see, we talk about the whole pagan thing.
Yeah.
The cross with the pagan circle.
Yeah.
And there it is. But if you have a look at here, first of all, there's something lovely. I don't know whether you can see this, Tony, but there's someone's painted a pebble with a poppy on it, which is actually quite sweet, just there. But the interesting story about this is actually just over this side. If you can come around and see this, Tony, the figure that's second in is a man called Thomas Bowie,
Right.
like David Bowie.
Yeah, yeah.
But that's not how you spell his name. His name was Bowey.
Oh.
And he was a private for the Durham Light Infantry. And he died in France, and not spectacularly like heroes and stuff do. And the story that went round at the time, and this is a story that only ran for about 30, 40 years, was that Bowie's ghost, and it's not Bowie, it's Bowie, A-Y, Thomas Bowie's ghost came back here to a sweep called Church Bank, which is just around the corner up here. And he walks that lane because they've spelt his name wrong on the memorial.
Right.
So, and they have. They've misspelled it. So we're going to go up and tell Bowie's story, because there's much more to the story than that once we get up. But for the meantime...
That's why Elvis is still alive.
Because they misspelled his middle name.
Elvis Aaron, President, misspelled Aaron.
They misspelled Aaron. Now, if you come down here, and I'm glad they put this here, because when I was researching it, this wasn't here. So they've obviously built this just because they knew we were coming. They should put our names on it, definitely. But along here, there's a bit of a witchy story, which is actually quite nice. And yeah, right down on the riverbank. Oh, hang on. There's something written on this one. With water. Oh, Tony, you want to see this? Look at that.
Ooh.
I've come down here to tell a little witchy story.
666.
We got the number of the beast in it. Is that a pentagram under it?
Is that what that? Yeah, star, pentagram.
I don't know whether you can see this.
What does that say on that? Listen to
I can't make out the words of this.
Listen to the
water.
ripples.
Listen to the flow. Listen to the ripples and
Something very slow.
and listen very slow. That's very good. So you've got this lovely thing, but it's along here. It's down this way. Apparently, during the English Civil War, it was still kind of close to the time when a book called the Malleus Maleficarum came out, which was the hammer of the witches, to try and find people, to try and get rid of anybody that didn't believe in the church, to kill them, to drive them out of towns, drive them out of villages.
Right.
Well, around the same time, when they cleaned out the Cavaliers here, now most of the north were loyal to King Charles.
Yeah.
When they cleaned out the Cavaliers, while they were going round, anyone that could be pointed out as a witch would go the journey as well. So the witches, when they were going through the town, came down to the riverside. Now the riverside back then, around the ford, which is up the other side, remember the main road went through the other side?
Yeah.
Along this bank, it was just what it is. Look at it, it's a tangle, look, even now. But if you can imagine, trees almost all the way down to the riverbank, and they came down here into the tangle of thorns and bracken, and they came along here. Kenny, let's have a hike. You can maybe read them easier.
You can.
Rippling, rappling.
What's that?
No, it's written in fancy writing.
Glittering, gleaming.
Coquet, shining in the sun.
Yeah.
But anyway, 3 women were said to be trying to escape from the Roundheads. Now, the Roundheads were based loosely on Cromwell's belief, and he was a Quaker, so they were Puritans. You know, anything that was remotely not religious, he was totally against, which is why he brought down the British royal family and cutting the head off King Charles I. So these women, who to this day, the people of Felton believe were not witches, but they had a reputation to be like the wise women of the village. And they came along here. No, not at all. They came along here and they hid underneath the old bridge. Now, you got to remember that was a wood bridge that was here at that time. But they came along here and they hid heavily vegetated area because it wasn't flat and it didn't have these. I go to the river, oh, the whoosh, oh, the clatter. The river rustles like the wind hitting the trees. Nice sentiments, but this is where they hid. Watch your step. This gets a bit of tangled. He's young at heart. Here we go. Yeah, watch it. There's a tree stump here as well. Oh. Oh, this has got a bit of atmosphere, hasn't it? And here we are. Under the bridge, echoing, standing by the corket. Now, the story goes that the three ladies came down and they put a lot of wood, trees and overgrowth along both sides so that nobody could see them. So, and you can imagine if you put like a big thorny bush here, Kenny, at that end, that bridge wasn't there, remember? The only thing that people could see them from was the ford, which you can just see the ripples of in the distance. So they had to hide in here, keep away from any prying eyes. And apparently somebody dropped them in it. And a group of roundheads came down to capture the women, and the three of them committed suicide here. Now, that's the story. I don't know how true it is, but what they said was they knew that there was no other choice for them but to be captured. Right. And apparently the river was running high, so they sliced each other's wrists, walked into the river, lay backwards, and allowed the current to take them downstream. Oh. So they sliced their veins in the water, lay back, and down they went. Now, you see, to me, I think that's completely wrong, because do you hear that? I can hear a car, but I heard voices there. But the women were innocent. And if they'd have lived and been captured, they'd have been tortured until they said they were what they weren't. There's a real field down here, mind. More of a field than I expected. Yeah. Well, let's go to the two most haunted places. They're not far from here, so... Ow. Watch your step toe. Step toe. Careful, Kenny. And I know little places like this, you think, how can there be so much history? There's a ton of history here, in all directions. You just got to scratch the surface, and it's all there to be found out. It's strange because those writings on the seats are very nice, yeah. And they're kind of almost pagan sayings. You know how beautiful nature is. Yeah. So I wonder who put 666 on. Adds a bit of an edge to it, doesn't it? And don't forget, if you're at home and you catch a sight of anything, make sure that you let us know. But we've got to come out of here and go up that church walk we told you about. But thank you very much, Northumberland Council, for building us a walkway. That was very thoughtful. And it generated this amazing story. Now the sky's falling. Now, the place where we've been told that Ian saw his ghost is up there. Right. But we're going to go up one side and we're going to come back down there. So the end is going to be the place where he saw something quite recently. But we've got to come, yeah, within the last couple of months. But, so I mean, I'm not talking like 20 years ago or something. It's really starting to chill in as well. My cheeks are absolutely bitter. So think yourself lucky that you're in the warm and snug. But watch out, because the places we go from this point on is the ghost hunt, really. Right. We'll necromance a little bit up here, and certainly on that sweep. A lot of the houses here, as I say, are relatively modern. And we said that we're going to be posh, and there's a fair bit of posh here, isn't there? Just because we're common and stuff.
50 or 60 people in there. So yeah,
You've worked at the Northumberland Arms, haven't you?
did New Year's there, which is weird, but again, very posh, lovely.
And it's still open. There's the sign we're
A lot
looking
of
for.
years ago, that's probably why.
That's why you didn't go back the next year.
No.
But anyway, there, Felton Parish Church. Now, this is the hill. Now, if memory serves, this is Church Walk. So, Tony, you lead on. Church Walk. Back in medieval times, this road had ceremony attached to it all over the place. Now, we heard about the Felton races, and those kind of things happened both sides of the river. It was a huge, grand event.
Right.
But in medieval times, up this hill, there's the death parade. A death parade. If anybody died, their bodies would be placed on like a barrow, but a highly ornate barrow.
Yeah.
And would be pushed up by friends and family. And it was done in a very particular manner. It was led by the vicar or preacher or priest, depending on your denomination, followed by 4 young boys from the church ringing bells.
Right.
Do you know why?
No idea.
Old-fashioned pagan ideal, and the church trying to balance it, to be as one with it, even though they were trying to wipe out anybody who believed. But the bells originally stemmed from chasing away evil spirits, so that an evil spirit can't attach itself to the soul of the dead person.
It's hard work. It's hill, isn't it?
This is a swine of a hill. It's much steeper than it looks. But we don't have a choice. We've got to get up here. And we're going to see one of the most amazing medieval churches that you've ever seen in your life.
Really?
It's incredible. Yeah. It's incredible. It's about another 100 yards. We should have roped ourselves together for this.
I wrote this up to Tony, no?
Yeah, Tony's finding no problems at all. But his legs are half the age of our legs.
Exactly.
It's the thing, you. Bloody young people.
No, Tony can even moonwalk.
I know he's even doing it backwards, just to rub our noses in it. But we've seen a lot of gorgeous churches, but you'll not see a nicer one than this.
And all this 3 years that we've done this?
Yeah, absolutely.
Really?
I think this is stunning. I mean, you kind of compare it with places like Brinkburn Abbey, say.
Yeah.
But as churches go, is this a flat bit?
I don't think it is.
Nearly. Just a little bit more.
Oh, wait. Oh, there's the church. You can just see the right-hand side, Tony.
I might need it.
Looks like it's got no roof.
Sorry?
No roof on it.
No, it's got... Oh, that's the old bit. You can see the old bells from... They've got some medieval bell from way, way back. It's freezing. Absolutely bitter. Oh, did you hear that?
That's a bell. You see talk of bell.
There's the churchyard. Look at that. How just totally different is this? Now, oh, blimey. Right. Well, we're halfway through. Oh, where?
There.
Oh,
It's where it's the screen and then, yeah, we're going in there.
grab a seat, Kenny. Grab it where you can. Now, we're here because of a lady called Sheena. And Sheena says, the one place you've really got to go is this church. It's the Church of St. Michael and the Angels. And it's absolutely stunning. It's absolutely beautiful. And Sheena said that whenever she walks into this cemetery, she gets a particular ominous feeling. When I talked to Ian said that he'd heard children's voices. He'd felt somebody touching him. And he says, particularly on the back side of the church, which is around, obviously around it. And he says, if you go to one place, it has to be St. Michael's and the Angels. Now, the church is getting a really nice reputation of being a lovely church, and the people that believe and choose to go have a thoroughly nice time there. But two of you have said that they've felt, seen, and heard stuff in there. Ian also has an amazing story from the back trail, which is literally just round the corner on the way back. And it'll be much easier because hopefully it'll be down the hill.
Roll down.
Yeah. So, Tony, if people would like to join us in the second half, because we're going in there now, how do they do it?
All you do is just click the link in the video description, whether you're a supporter or not, and part 2 will be there. If you're not a supporter, just join. Easily done, and then part 2 is available.
Fantastic. Make sure you do that. It's only like 80 pence a week. It's coppers, and you get 3 years worth of shows immediately. Yeah. So please join us if you possibly can. I'm going to take a beat, check my notes, make sure I'm not going to miss anything.
It's eerie, quiet.